Hello, I'm Jackie Jones, a candidate for the Court of Common Pleas of Delaware County. Today we're going to talk about the family court and what it does. We've had these discussions about things like criminal court, and I've gotten a lot of interest because that is one area where we have a lot of cases. We are one of the busiest criminal courts in the state of Pennsylvania. But family court is also very busy, and let me tell you a little bit about that. Most people are aware that if someone gets arrested, they end up in court and that they'll have to see a judge. But we forget how much our lives are intrinsically entwined with the court system. In family court, we handle things like divorce, custody, and support. Support of children and support of spouses, and increasingly support of elderly relatives. Now, that's a whole other subject. But what's important to know when choosing a judge for the court, family court especially, here in Delaware County, most judges begin their career in family court. There are obviously notable exceptions, but often it's the first stop. It's interesting because people put not very experienced judges into family court thinking that nothing too bad can happen, but that is absolutely not true. As someone who's practiced family law for a good chunk of her career and actually does a lot of that right now, it is so important to have a family court judge who knows what they're doing. Sometimes it's simple. There have been judges who did not realize, because they've never practiced in that area, that pretrial conferences are not only the norm, but they're important. They're important because you want to frame the issues as much as possible so that we are actually getting a good result. Family court, and I tell people, a judge can take your property, your children, and your very life. Family court is the part where they can take your children. Think about it. Many people have gotten married, and obviously divorce is a commonplace thing in this country. The family court determines not only when a divorce happens, but how it happens, who gets the house, who gets the kids, how our assets are developed and divided. So you want a judge who understands the law very well, but it's also a position where equity is important and figuring out how to treat people fairly. And notice I say equity, not equality. Why do I say that? Because it's not as simple as treating people exactly the same. For instance, one person could have been a stay-at-home spouse, and they have not been in the workforce for years while the other person makes multiple six figures. You don't want to treat them equally because it wouldn't be fair to the one who was supporting the family in other ways. But you do want to treat them with equity so that they can have appropriate treatment and that walking out of it, no spouse is indigent unnecessarily. The other thing to consider is not just divorce, but custody court. Custody is a big part of what judges do in family court. There are 16 primary factors we use in Pennsylvania when making a decision about custody. We have to deal with everything from allegations of childhood abuse to issues of whether or not the child should have certain medical procedures at times. In those cases, it's very important to remember that we live in a state that presumes that both parents should have equal right to parent their children. And so we want judges who are not biased towards men or towards women, but again, understand that as people, that they should have a right to be involved in their child's life. The same happens with support when we come to spouse support and child support. You have to know how to take into account things like how much money someone's making or how much they're capable of making. You also want to consider things about like how their money comes to them. For instance, I've represented a number of people involved in unions, and there are certain unions where they're very, very busy in the summer and maybe less so in the winter. And so as an attorney, I've often advocated that we spread out the payments in such a way that the child gets a consistent payment, but that the parent can pay more when they have more money and less when they have less. There's also an issue of spousal support. There may be a spouse that is a dependent spouse or a spouse who's going to be in the home and has additional expenses that one doesn't. Protection from abuse orders, that often comes up as well. There are a lot of divorces that begin with acts of physical, mental, or emotional violence that cause for the courts to decide whether or not people should be able to be or allowed to be in contact with one another. And so those are very important determinations. You want someone who's not easily fooled. You want someone who will listen to what's going on and will not immediately jump to conclusions, but you want to protect people when protection is necessary, especially as it relates to children. Protecting children is paramount and very, very important. So the family court is one of the most important courts that we have here in the Court of Common Pleas. And evaluating a potential judge candidate on their ability to handle and make decisions in family court is legitimate. Now, maybe some of you have questions. If you have questions before I go off live, you certainly feel free to ask them. But as someone who has practiced in family court, I will give you an idea of what that typically means for me. What it means is that someone comes to me and they say, let's say we're having a custody issue and I need a custody attorney. I typically tell clients that though they pay me, I, in my mind, work for their kids. So if they hire me, they have to know that I'm going to do what's right for their children. I'm going to tell them when I think they're not acting appropriately. So sometimes people get involved in custody cases and they forget that it's about the best interest of the child. That is the standard. And they want to use their custody case, they want to use their attorney to fight battles that were better left fought in divorce. I don't think that is appropriate. I think also as a judge, you have to decide in what cases children should be brought in front of you so that you can hear from them, and when you should make sure, essentially, that that child stays far, far away. That is part of the awesome responsibility of being a judge. You don't get to be an advocate anymore, except for doing what's best for the child. That's the position that you can safely advocate from. But you don't get to advocate from others. You don't get to advocate for fathers or grandparents, whoever. You actually have to decide what's in the best interest of the child. That is your interest. It also is important when you're looking at support. We do not want people to support their families to the extent that they're bankrupt and living on the streets. So you have to have a balancing act. You have to look at the formula, and you have to know when you're allowed to deviate from the formula, and in fact, when you should deviate, which is rarely. So it's really important to know all those rules. There are situations where someone does not have to pay any support, and you have to really understand what the rules are and how. And there are instances where you have to determine whether or not somebody has the ability to make more money, should be making more money, can make more money, is hiding money from there. So those are important as well. So in the grand scheme of things, family court is one of the most important courts that we have, one of our most important divisions in the Court of Common Pleas. It also is the place that is most common for a new judge to practice. I'm proud to say that I have been practicing in the Court of Common Pleas in the Family Court Division for 16 years. I have handled cases from start to finish, top to bottom, up and down, inside and out. I have negotiated in divorce cases. I have written property settlement agreements. I have handled trials fully for custody and for child support, as well as appealing, and those are de novo appeals from our master's level, conciliator level, to judges who are empowered with making those decisions, and even to the Superior Court in Pennsylvania on a number of things, including alimony. So I'm prepared from day one to work in that division as well as others. So if you have more questions about what the court does, reach out to me. You can find me here on Facebook, on YouTube, at our website at Jackie for Judge, www.JackieForJudge, Jackie for Judge. And as always, and Instagram. About Instagram. So as always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. If you have questions, reach out. I would love to talk to you some more about all the areas of our court. Have a great day.